Everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about a type of organization that's probably all around you, but you might not even realize it. Think about your homeowners association, or maybe a favorite charity. We're diving deep into the world of non-stock corporations.
Okay, so when you hear the word corporation, your brain probably jumps straight to shareholders, profits, dividends, the whole nine yards, right? But what if I told you there's a whole other kind of corporation out there, one that's built on a completely different foundation, where making money for owners just isn't the main goal?
And that brings us to this definition right here. A non-stock corporation is all about what it can't do with its money. Now, this is a super important point. They can absolutely make a profit, but here's the catch. That profit can't be handed out as dividends to the people in charge. Nope. It has to be plowed right back into the organization to keep its mission going. It's all about profit for a purpose, not for personal pockets.
So if it's not strictly for profit, what is it for? Well, that's what we're about to get into. This is really the heart and soul of these organizations, their purpose. Let's take a look at the missions these unique entities are actually built for.
You know, to remember all the legally recognized purposes, there's a pretty neat little mnemonic, CREPSC. It sounds complicated, but it covers a huge range of things you see every day. We're talking charitable foundations, religious groups, schools and universities, and even professional groups for, say, doctors or lawyers. It also includes scientific societies, social clubs, and civic groups like your local Chamber of Commerce. It's a really broad and, frankly, super impactful list.
All right, so if these corporations don't have stockholders, who's actually in charge? The answer is members. But being a member of a non-stock corporation is a whole different ballgame than owning a share of stock. Let's see how that creates a totally different power structure.
And this shows the single biggest difference. In your typical company, power is tied to how much money you've put in. One share gets you one vote. Simple. But in a non-stock corporation, the default rule is way more democratic. It's one member, one vote. That's it. It's about counting heads, not shares. Your influence comes from being part of the group, not from how deep your pockets are.
This also means your membership is, well, it's personal. You can't just hop onto a stock market app and sell your spot in the local golf club or your position in a professional society like you would a share of Apple. Unless the organization's own rules specifically say you can, and most don't, that membership belongs to you and you alone.
So, if you've got this unique ownership and a different way of voting, it makes sense that you'd have a unique way of running things, right? So let's pull back the curtain on the leadership and the governance of a non-stock corporation.
Okay, let's just quickly run through some of the key differences here. First off, they're led by a board of trustees, not directors. And unlike stock corporations, they can have more than 15 trustees, which is great for getting more voices in the room. Their terms are also longer, up to 3 years, which gives them a bit more stability. And get this. Look who elects the officers. By default, it's the members themselves. That's a much more direct form of democracy. And to top it off, they've got the flexibility to hold their big meetings anywhere in the country, not just at the main office.
Now, all this theory is one thing, but we all know the real world can get messy. So now we're going to look at a few really fascinating court cases where these exact rules were put to the test and judges had to step in and say, okay, here's what this really means in practice.
So our first puzzle is all about a condominium corporation. Here's the situation. You had a powerful developer, Moldex, who owned most of the condo units, but they weren't the majority of the individual members. And that set the stage for a huge fight over who really had control.
The whole case really boiled down to this one simple but critical question. To legally hold a meeting, do you need a majority of the individual people to show up, or do you just need a majority of the total votes, which were tied to the units? The developer, of course, argued for votes, since they controlled them. But a single unit owner said, no, it should be about the number of people in the room.
And the Supreme Court was absolutely crystal clear on this one. The default rule stands. You count the heads. The quorum is based on the number of actual, living, breathing members who have voting rights. So even though the 29 members who showed up represented a majority of the units, there were 108 members in total. So, no quorum. End of story.
So why is this such a big deal? Why does it matter to you? Well, this ruling is basically a shield for the little guy. It stops a single, powerful entity, like a developer who still owns a bunch of unsold units, from just completely steamrolling the association and ignoring the voices of individual homeowners. It keeps that one member, one vote spirit alive.
All right, our next case is, well, it's a bit of a weird one.
You had a member of a golf club who passed away, but he had some unpaid dues. So the club, following its own bylaws, sent a notice that they were going to auction off his very valuable golf share to the deceased member's last known address. Yeah.
The court basically just said, nope, not gonna fly. The ruling was that even if you are technically following your own rules, you can't act in bad faith. The club knew the guy was dead, sending a notice to him instead of making a real effort to contact his family or his estate. That's just not fair. The big takeaway here is that you can't let procedure trump basic fairness.
And for our last case, let's tackle this puzzle. What happens when another corporation is a member of your non-stock corporation? Can someone who works for that company but isn't a member themselves get a seat on the board of trustees?
And on this, the court made a very practical common sense call. The answer is yes, they absolutely can. Look, a corporation is a legal entity, it's not a person. It can only act through a human being. So if you were to deny that representative a seat on the board, you would basically be silencing the corporate member entirely and taking away their right to participate.
So, what happens when it's time for a non-stock corporation to close its doors for good? Well, there's a very strict order for how things have to be handled. You can remember it with the mnemonic LCRMP. First, you got to pay all your liabilities, all your debts. Then you return any assets that were given to you with a specific condition attached. After that, any charitable assets have to be passed along to a similar organization. Then, if the rules allow it, you can distribute what's left to the members, and if not, it gets distributed according to a formal plan.
Phew, we have covered a lot of ground. So, to bring it all home, let's put everything side by side for one final, super clear comparison. This is the ultimate showdown. Stock versus non-stock.
This chart right here really lays it all out. Look at the core differences. Purpose, profit versus nonprofit. Owners, stockholders versus members. Voting, by share versus by head. The board, directors versus trustees, with different rules on size and how long they can serve. Who elects the officers? The board versus the members, and even where they can meet. Every single one of these differences flows from that one fundamental split in purpose we talked about at the very beginning. This is really the key takeaway. So now that you're armed with all this knowledge, I want you to start looking around. Your church, your kid's school, that local sports club, the charity you donate to. You're going to start seeing these purpose-driven corporations everywhere, and you'll understand how they tick. So the real question is, how do these rules shape the organizations that literally shape our communities? Thanks for tuning in.